If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. But if the church knew what you're about to find out, you'd be dead too. That's the line that kicked off the worst, and maybe the most unbelievable, year of my life. My name's Elias Crane, 32 years old, freelance archivist and part-time historical consultant for museums. I've lived a pretty normal, if boring life. Until last summer. My grandfather, Benedict Crane, passed away at 87. He was a quiet, sharp-eyed man who never talked about his past, and as far as I knew, he'd spent most of his adult life translating religious manuscripts for various academic journals and private collectors. Sounds harmless, right? That's what I thought too. Until the funeral. We buried him in a modest plot outside of Litchfield, Connecticut, right where he'd lived alone for the past 50 years. I expected the funeral to be sparsely attended. What I didn't expect was the man in the tailored cassock standing in the back, watching silently, not saying a word, and vanishing before I could ask who he was. Later that week, while sorting through Grandpa's things in his creepy, dust-choked colonial house, I found a sealed letter addressed to me. It was tucked into a thick leather journal wrapped in an old altar cloth. The letter said, "There are things the Vatican doesn't want the world to know. Things they've buried, rewritten, and rewritten again. I spent my life protecting one of their greatest secrets. And now, it's your turn." Attached to the letter was a rusted key labeled BV 1964. I was confused. My grandfather had always been a rational, even cynical man, not the conspiracy theory type. But this smelled like Dan Brown's rejected drafts. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd meant every word, especially once I pried up the floorboard beneath his old writing desk and found the safe. The safe wasn't huge, but it was heavy and old, at least 60 years. The lock was mechanical. The key fit. Inside was a stack of brittle documents, 2 rolls of microfilm, and a single black and white photograph. The photo made my blood run cold. It showed a young priest, maybe in his early 30s, sitting beside a boy who couldn't be older than 5 or 6. The priest had his hand gently resting on the boy's shoulder. Both were smiling. The priest was unmistakably Albano Vespari, better known to the world as Pope Leo XIII. The boy? That was my grandfather. I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at it. My grandfather, the quiet, antisocial man who raised my father to distrust institutions of any kind, was claiming to be the illegitimate child of a pope. And not just any pope. Leo XIII had been deeply controversial, known for his secretive reforms and sudden death under mysterious circumstances in 1965. He had no known family, no acknowledged heirs, and died surrounded by rumors of internal church conflict. I was about to toss it all into the crazy old man stuff pile, until I found the journal's final entry. They've kept the truth hidden for over 70 years. But cracks are forming. If they find out I passed this on to you, they won't stop. Trust no one, especially anyone who wears a collar. That's when the phone rang. No caller ID, just static. Then a voice, raspy, male, with a thick Italian accent. "You don't know what you've inherited, Mr. Crane. Walk away while you still can." Click. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for a few nights after that either. But curiosity is a wicked drug. And my grandfather, the man I thought I knew, had just dropped a lit match into the dry tinder of my quiet life. The next morning, I loaded the documents into a locked file case, took the photograph, and caught the earliest flight to Rome. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my parents. Not my girlfriend. Not my work. I was about to uncover what my grandfather had spent a lifetime protecting. I just didn't realize how many people were willing to kill to keep it buried. There's a unique kind of silence in Rome's Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana. It's not the silence of reverence, it's tension, like the walls are listening. I'd been in the city less than 24 hours, still sleep-deprived, jittery from espresso, and half convinced I was about to be arrested just for walking into the Vatican archives. But my name was on a visitor's list. I hadn't submitted a request. No, someone else had. Let me back up a bit. After I landed in Rome, I checked into a nondescript hotel in Trastevere under an alias my grandfather had scribbled in the margins of his journal, Anthony Bell. I brought only what mattered: the photo, the letter, the key, and scanned copies of the documents from the safe. Most of them written in Latin, some in Old Italian, and one stamped with an unfamiliar seal that looked like a crossed pair of bones inside a circle of flames. I didn't recognize the symbol, But when I tried reverse image search, my laptop crashed. Literally. Froze up, full shutdown. Twice. It felt like a coincidence until I tried again from the lobby computer. Same result. That's when I noticed the Vatican Library had emailed me. Your appointment is confirmed. Archivist C. DeSantis will meet you at entry porta B, 10 a.m. I never made an appointment. I showed up anyway. The building is as old as sin and as guarded as Fort Knox. You can't just drop by. Every movement inside is tracked. Your badge has a chip in it. I know because they made me wear one. The security guard at the gate looked me up and down, scanned my badge, and said, "Welcome back, Senior Bell." I'd never been here in my life. I was escorted to a reading room that felt more like a cathedral than a library. Barrel-vaulted ceilings, marble floors, ornate columns carved with Latin prayers I couldn't translate. A man stood waiting near a stack of ancient volumes. Mid-50s, charcoal gray suit, priest collar, but no warmth in his eyes. "Mr. Crane," he said. "Not Bell. Crane. My real name." My mouth went dry. "How do you know who I am?" "I knew your grandfather." "For a time," he said. "I also know why you're here." He handed me a plain manila envelope. Inside was a single sheet of vellum. On it, written in that same precise hand from my grandfather's journal, was a message. "If you are reading this, then they got to me before I could warn you myself. Carlo DeSantis can be trusted, but only up to a point." When I looked up, Carlo had already sat down and opened a massive, dust-covered tome titled Liber Sanguinis, the Book of Blood. "This," he said, tapping a finger on the cracked leather, "is the Church's unspoken ledger. The names that must never be recorded officially, but must also never be forgotten." He flipped the pages with surgical precision, then paused. His finger landed beside a name. Albano Vespari, filius inductus, Benedictus Carinus. Inducted son, not recognized, not legitimate, but known. I stared at it, the Latin swirling in my vision. "My grandfather wasn't lying," I whispered. "No," said Carlo, "but he didn't tell you everything." That's when he leaned in and dropped the next bombshell. Albano Vespari, Pope Leo XIII, didn't die of heart failure in 1965. He was executed by the Camerlengo Council. I blinked. "You're joking." "I assure you," Carlo said with an eerie calm, "no one jokes about the Camerlengo." According to him, the council wasn't just a ceremonial group. It was, and still is, the Church's shadow court. They operate under a singular doctrine, puritas supra omnia, purity above all. Pope Leo's affair with a young noblewoman, my supposed great-grandmother, was discovered after his election. But instead of removing him, the council covered it up. They created a false medical report, buried the woman, relocated the child, my grandfather, under a different name. Benedict Crane was born Benedetto Carinus, raised in secret by monks, and later smuggled into the U.S. under a forged identity. But here's the real kicker. "You, Elias," Carlos said, "are what we call a vestigium veritatis, a remnant of truth. Your bloodline should not exist." He stood then, abruptly. The tone of the meeting shifted. "This is as far as I go," he said. "They're watching even now." I stood too, heart thudding. "Why help me at all?" He looked at me, unreadable. "Because I swore an oath. And because your grandfather saved my life in 1982. But from here on out, you're on your own." Carlo walked away. The envelope he left behind had one more thing, a Vatican keycard, and a scrawled address across the back. Camerlengo Archives, Sub-Basilica Access, code 8492, V, midnight. I left the library in a daze. The sun had dipped low. Bells tolled in the distance. I didn't know it yet, but by midnight, I'd be standing beneath St. Peter's Basilica, staring at a sealed iron vault no one was supposed to find, and definitely not open. Because once I did, there was no turning back. If you've never stood beneath the Basilica after hours, let me tell you, it's not holy. It's hollow. It feels like God left centuries ago, and all that's left is marble, whispers, and secrets. The guards outside St. Peter's weren't the Swiss guard. They were plain clothes, armed, and carrying earpieces. Vatican intelligence. The real ones who handle things when public relations won't cut it. I shouldn't have gotten in. But the Vatican keycard Carlo gave me worked like a dream. I followed the scrawled address through a maintenance corridor behind the sacristy, down a narrow spiral staircase. At the bottom, a reinforced steel door with a retina scanner and a keypad. I typed in the code, 8492, V. It beeped once, then hissed open. What I stepped into felt like something between an ossuary and a data center. Cold stone walls lit with bluish LEDs. Dozens of locked cabinets lined the perimeter, each with plaques that bore strange combinations of Latin and Italian. Some had names, some had only dates. One said simply, Porte Malorum, non aperire, gates of evil, do not open. Cool. At the far end was an unmarked iron vault with an etched symbol I'd seen once before, on the seal from my grandfather's hidden documents. Two crossed femur bones encircled by a flaming ring. The vault of the veiled apostles. The card worked again. Inside was something I wasn't prepared for. A black binder, sealed in plastic, labeled Project, Ex Utero Sanctum, and a file with my grandfather's name and mine. My hands shook as I opened it. There were photos of me from college, surveillance logs of my apartment, a medical file detailing my blood type, even my childhood vaccinations, fingerprints, DNA sequences, all dated before I was even born. The oldest file was dated March 21st, 1989, the day my father met my mother. They'd been tracking me from before conception. Then I saw the most disturbing file, a red folder marked Enhancement Candidate, Vestigium CRVX. Inside, a sonogram from 1991, a blood test labeled luciferase markers, positive, a psychiatric profile marked observation phase, age 8 to 12. I dropped it. The edges of my vision went white. My grandfather hadn't just hidden something about the Vatican. He'd hidden something within me. That's when the lights shut off. Total darkness. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from behind me. I backed into a cabinet, heart hammering. A red laser appeared on the floor. Not from a gun, from a scanning device. It swept up, stopping dead center on my chest. A voice spoke from the shadows. Mr. Crane, you were warned. I bolted. I didn't think. Just ran. Took a blind corner, shoulder-checked a filing cabinet, knocked over a lamp. Whatever was behind me wasn't running. They didn't need to. I burst through the iron vault, turned, and slammed it shut. The lock re-engaged with a metallic clunk. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. The message. You opened the vault. You have 3 days. Leave Rome. Or die in it. No signature. No goodbye. Just cold certainty. Back in my hotel, I laid everything out on the bed. The files, the keycard, the photo of my grandfather and Pope Leo. My head was pounding. My thoughts were chaos. There were too many questions. Why did the church care so much about my bloodline? What the hell was ex utero sanctum? And what did it mean to be Vestigium CRVX? A remnant of the cross? Then I noticed something in the corner of the photo. A shadow. Not my grandfather's. Not Pope Leo's. A third figure, almost invisible, watching from behind the latticework of a confession booth. Someone had always been watching. They say when you go digging into the past, you should expect to get dirty. But no one warns you about bleeding. After the break-in at the Vatican archives, I went dark. Burner phone, different hotel, no electronics. I scrubbed every digital trace of my presence in Rome. Or tried to. But they always know. I only turned my new phone on once, to call the number scribbled in the back of the folder marked Enhancement Candidate, Vestigium CRVX. A woman answered. She said 2 words. You're late. And then hung up. 2 hours later, I was on a train heading north out of Rome toward Orvieto, a hilltop town once used as a papal refuge during plagues and uprisings. Quiet, beautiful, and apparently home to someone who claimed to share my blood. She called herself Livia Carinus. Yes, Carinus. My grandfather's real surname. She met me in an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town. Wore sunglasses despite the dim light. Moved like someone who hadn't truly rested in years. Her voice was low, guarded, and every sentence felt like a test. You look like him, she said, circling me. But you're thinner. He had war in his eyes. You still have questions. You're my cousin? I asked. Not quite. More like a sister of circumstance. We're both what the church calls anomalies. She poured 2 glasses of something dark and bitter. It tasted like cold bark. I drank it anyway. Your grandfather wasn't the only child fathered by the Vatican, she began. Between 1935 and 1980, the Camerlengo Council ran a clandestine operation through a Jesuit offshoot called Ordo Malachii. The Order of Malachi, I translated. She nodded. They believed a bloodline touched by sanctified origins could be enhanced, weaponized, controlled. And you and I? We were bred, she said flatly. Not born. Livia had spent the last 10 years in hiding after surviving something she called the ninth sealing. A ritual, a purge, and according to her, only 3 vestigiums survived. Me, her, and someone else she wouldn't name. They're not hunting you because of what your grandfather did, she said, leaning closer. They're hunting you because you're still active. Active. Your blood isn't just a record. It's a key. She pulled something from her jacket, a vial of crimson fluid that shimmered with flecks of gold. This is mine, she said. But yours? Yours lights up. They call it lux sanguinis, light of blood. According to Livia, when a true descendant of the Carinus line nears an unsealed relic, particularly one tied to apostolic prophecy, their blood reacts. Like a magnet to ancient power. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You're telling me I'm some kind of Catholic divining rod? No, she said. I'm telling you the church thinks you are. Then she pulled out a photo. It was grainy, clearly printed from an analog camera. It showed my grandfather, Benedict, kneeling in front of a stone altar, holding a dagger with a blade shaped like a crucifix. The caption, Mount Laris, June 1971. Below it, site of the third apostle's remnant. What is that? Livia hesitated. Then, a finger, preserved in salt, believed to be St. Bartholomew's. I stared. You're saying my grandfather found it? She nodded. And now it's missing. The council thinks he passed its location to you. I didn't know whether to laugh or puke. The chapel lights flickered. Livia's eyes narrowed. They found us. I barely had time to register what that meant before the back window shattered inward. A flash grenade hit the floor, and everything went white. When I came to, I was outside, on the chapel steps. Alone. Livia was gone. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just a note, burned along the edges, tucked into my coat pocket. Find Mount Laris. They'll come for you either way. Make it count. Elsie. And scribbled beneath in my grandfather's handwriting. Lux sanguinis non tenebris. The light does not belong to the dark. The next train out of Orvieto took me toward Florence, the last known location of Mount Laris, buried somewhere in the Apennines, hidden by centuries of rewritten maps and dead languages. But I wasn't just running anymore. I was chasing, because whatever the church buried up there, in salt, in blood, in lies, my family bled for it. And now? Now it was my turn. You'd think a place like Mount Laris would have some kind of signage. A trail, a plaque, maybe even a warning. Instead, it was a smear on a faded 15th century papal map, marked only with a symbol, a flayed hand cradling a drop of light. It took me 3 days, 2 bribes, and 1 near-fatal hike to find the entrance, hidden behind a crumbling shepherd's chapel halfway up an unmarked slope in the Apennines. The chapel wasn't empty. There were candles, dozens of them, arranged in concentric rings around the altar, burnt down to waxy puddles. Carved into the altar stone was a phrase I recognized from Livia's note. Lux sanguinis non tenebris. The light does not belong to the dark. Beneath the altar was a stone hatch, iron-banded, padlocked. My grandfather's key, the one from the safe back home, slid in with a satisfying click. The hatch creaked open, revealing a stairway into the earth. The scent that hit me wasn't decay. It was salt. And something else. Blood. The catacombs beneath Mount Laris weren't on any map. They stretched for what felt like miles. Walls carved with Latin scripture. Symbols painted in dried ochre and bone dust. I walked for what must have been an hour before I found it. A chamber, circular, domed, with a shallow pit at the center. In the pit sat a stone sarcophagus. Its lid had been sealed with wax, now cracked. An inscription ran along the edge. Reliqui Bartholomew. Non movere. Remains of Bartholomew. Do not disturb. Naturally, I disturbed them. The lid was heavy but slid with effort. Inside, a linen-wrapped bundle, salt-crusted and bound with a red ribbon. I peeled it open. Inside was a finger, blackened with age, skin leathery, bone exposed in spots, and yet it pulsed faintly with golden light. The remnant. I wasn't even religious, but the air around it made my skin tingle, like God was breathing down my neck, or something pretending to be. Then I heard the whisper. He has come. I spun around. They stepped out from the shadows in silent formation. A dozen of them. Robed. Hooded. Eyes hidden behind veils of gauze soaked in oil and ash. Each bore the same symbol from the map, the hand and the drop. One stepped forward, taller, his robe embroidered in gold thread. He removed his hood. A young man, mid-30s, piercing gray eyes. He smiled. "You are the light bearer." "No," I said, backing away. I don't even know what I am." "You carry the Carinus blood. You opened the vault. Found the remnant. You are the prophecy." He raised a dagger, the one from the photo of my grandfather, and knelt. The rest followed. Lux sanguinis redibit. The bloodlight returns. Turns out, these weren't just zealots. They were descendants, children of others like Livia and me. Some born in secret, some escaped, all hidden. The church thought them dead. They call themselves Custodes Laris, guardians of the mountain. For generations, they've waited for a blood heir strong enough to reunite the three remnants. Bartholomew's finger was only the first. "The church sought to end us," said the leader, who called himself Cassian. "But prophecy is a wildfire. You can't burn it out with silence." He gestured to the remnant. "This one is yours now." I didn't want it. But as soon as my hand touched the ancient finger, I felt it. Heat, pain, and a vision. I was in a stone courtyard, moonlight above. A robed figure, faceless, standing across from me, chanting in Latin. A second voice, deep, booming, crying out in warning. Then fire, and a symbol burning into my palm. I stumbled back, gasping. Cassian caught me. "The relic knows you," he said softly. "The others will too." That night, I slept for the first time in days, in the cold, stone sanctuary of a crypt that once housed a saint's remains. When I woke, Cassian was gone. In his place was a note. "We march for Jerusalem. The second remnant lies beneath the well of the skulls. Come, or be hunted like the rest." See, he'd taken the dagger, left me the remnant, and burned a mark into my skin, a cross shaped like a blade, red and raw. I'm not just Elias Crane anymore. I'm the vestigium, the salt prophet. And if what Cassian said is true, the church didn't just lie. They're preparing for war. Jerusalem burns in silence. Not with fire, not yet, but with weight. History, betrayal, prophecy. It hums in the air like a second heartbeat, waiting for the spark. I arrived at dawn, guided by a GPS coordinate burned onto a flash drive Cassian left with the remnant. The destination? A graveyard outside the old city walls. Abandoned. Fenced off. No signs. No tourists. At the center was a collapsed mausoleum, caved in by time, or design. This was the Well of the Skulls. I climbed down alone. The earth was loose, shifting under my boots. Beneath the rubble, the shaft opened like a throat, descending into darkness. There were markings on the walls, a spiral of names written in ancient Syriac. Some were saints. Others, lost apostles, heretics, forgotten popes. Then I saw it, carved in blood-red ink. Crux Lux, Benedictus Ultimus, the final benediction. The chamber at the bottom wasn't a tomb. It was a vault. There were no coffins, just a raised slab, draped in crimson cloth, and a reliquary sealed in glass. Inside, a vertebra, charred, gold-threaded, still faintly glowing. The final remnant. As I approached, something shifted behind me. I turned. Fast. 3 figures. All black suits. No collars this time, but I knew who they were. Custodes Sancti-Umbri, keepers of the Holy Shadow. The Vatican's secret police. And one of them was Carlo DeSantis. "You should have stayed out of this," he said, stepping forward. "Your bloodline wasn't meant to survive. We made sure of it. I guess your paperwork sucked." He sighed. "You opened the vault. Found the finger. Took the mark. That alone gives you power. But the spine? That makes you dangerous." He pulled a gun. Before he could raise it, Cassian emerged from the darkness behind him, like a ghost pulled from the stone itself, and drove the dagger straight into DeSantis' side. Gunfire erupted. I hit the floor. Shattered glass. Echoes. Screams. When the dust cleared, Cassian was bleeding out. The final remnant clutched to his chest. "You have to finish it," he gasped. "Unite them. The finger. The heart. The spine. What happens if I do?" I asked, voice shaking. His eyes fluttered. "The truth will burn them. Burn everything." The remnants weren't just relics. They were keys. And the body they belonged to, whoever it was, wasn't just apostolic. It was a prototype. A holy weapon. A child bred by the church long before my grandfather. Before me. Sealed away. Forgotten. Until now. I pressed the 3 pieces together on the slab. The finger, the heart shard I had found embedded in the remnant case from Florence, and the glowing vertebra. They pulsed, fused, and the slabs split down the center, revealing a sarcophagus made of bone. Inside was a body, small, childlike, wrapped in flame-hardened linen, and around its neck, a pendant in the shape of a burning cross. The walls trembled. Somewhere far above us, the chapel exploded in white fire. I heard screams, and a voice, not from the chamber, not from me, from everywhere. The blood returns. The flame walks again. The body opened its eyes. Golden. Alive. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. Only that I emerged from the earth into a city that suddenly felt lighter. Police were everywhere. Sirens. But no one saw me. No one followed. The chamber was gone. Collapsed. Swallowed. But I felt it in my bones, like a phantom burn. Something woke up, and I let it. I live off-grid now. Mountains. No signal. I don't sleep much. Livia is still missing. The church hasn't come for me again. Not yet. But I see the signs. Strange lights above Vatican City. Papal speeches filled with veiled warnings. A new cardinal appointed with no history, no file, and golden eyes. And sometimes, in my dreams, I hear a child's voice whispering in Latin. Crux lux. Lux crux. The cross is the light. The light is the cross. And I wonder, did I destroy something? Or did I just light the fuse?